Over the past 3 decades, Paul Thomas Anderson has solidified himself as one of the greatest filmmakers of his generation. PTA is a creative genius who can do it all. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I'm really excited that this video gives me the chance to revisit some of his work and talk about why it's so special to me. So let's get into it. Starting off the list at number 9 is Inherent Vice. PTA's 2014 release is a stoner noir comedy starring Joaquin Phoenix as a private investigator named Doc, very leisurely solving a mystery. Based on a Thomas Pynchon novel of the same name, Anderson's film is a fun caper that really rests on the laurels of its incredibly charming cast. Outside of Phoenix, returning to work with Anderson after their success on The Master, the supporting cast is made up almost exclusively of new faces, all bringing their A-game, like Josh Brolin, Catherine Watterson, Reese Witherspoon, Owen Wilson, Benicio del Toro, Hong Chow, even Martin Short, who completely steals his scenes. And while there is fun to be had and charm aplenty, our protagonist Doc is just too laid back and chill to be a compelling engine for a central mystery that gets way too convoluted for its own good. It's hard to luxuriate in the vibes when I'm having to take notes on all of the names and motivations involved in some grand conspiracy. Fortunately, despite some issues with the script, PTA remains a masterful director, staging some really fun and compelling scenes. The score from Johnny Greenwood is dependable as ever, and the cinematography from Robert Elswit gorgeously captures the 1970s aesthetic. Everything comes together in a presentable package. I just wish I enjoyed its contents a little more. Number 8 is appropriately Hard 8. While I think this is a good film overall and an even more impressive debut feature, it certainly feels constrained by its limitations in scale and budget. The film's about an aging gambler named Sidney who takes a younger guy under his wings, teaching him not only the rules of gaming casinos but also life. Sidney creates a bit of a found family of misfits, trying to absolve himself of whatever sins he committed as the father to his real children. This dynamic is explored sparsely but not exactly subtly, and I wish Anderson was afforded the runtime to dive deeper into these relationships. The acting performances are great across the board. It's no wonder Anderson would choose to work with leads Philip Baker Hall and John C. Reilly again, as they absolutely crush it here. Philip Seymour Hoffman really pops in his one scene. He's electrifying in a way that really sets up why he would have such an amazing and mutually beneficial partnership with Anderson over the rest of his career. And then there's an actor like Samuel L. Jackson, effortlessly charismatic and menacing in a role here amidst his appearances in Quentin Tarantino classics like Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown. It's kind of insane he's never acted in any other Anderson film to date, but it also feels like a fitting crossover of the respective recurring ensembles of Tarantino and Anderson. Hard 8 feels like it shares the most DNA with Tarantino of any film in Anderson's career, before he firmly established himself with a more unique voice in his masterful follow-up, Boogie Nights. Licorice Pizza is a film I'm about 99% positive on until the very final moments, where I think the ending kind of makes the rest of the movie fall apart. It's a coming-of-age story about a teenage boy, annoyingly wise beyond his years, who shirks the typical wonders of adolescence in exchange for responsibility and pseudo-maturity. And then there's a more free-spirited adult woman whose life lacks purpose and gets drawn into the seeming stability of a kid who outwardly has his life figured out. Together, these two bring out the best in each other and impart some valuable lessons along the way. Their quasi-courtship is cute and sincere and charming and real. It's set against the backdrop of California in the 1970s and features an all-timer of a soundtrack, gorgeous period imagery, and some really fun cameos amidst a stacked ensemble cast. There are individual scenes in this movie that are some of my favorites of PTA's entire career. Bradley Cooper is sensational as the real-life John Peters and nearly steals the entire movie in his limited screen time. Sean Penn delivers movie star bravura in a sequence that elevates the central relationship to blockbuster heights. And the two relatively inexperienced leads this film hinges pretty much its entire success on more than hold their own. Alana Hayam, mostly known as a musician, is effortlessly cool and charming and flawed and relatable. Cooper Hoffman feels like watching a younger version of his father, the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. Cooper's casting and performance works not on just a meta level of PTA bringing in the son of his late friend and collaborator, but as a sterling performance in its own right. But Licorice Pizza loses me with its ending, where the film elevates its central relationship to being a genuine love story. It just doesn't work for me, and I was much more on board when the film was about two complicated people who have love for each other, learn from each other, and use those lessons to better themselves as they move on with their individual lives. As a coming-of-age story about a 15-year-old who needs to learn to be a kid and a 25-year-old stuck in Arrested Development, Licorice Pizza is a modern classic. As a romance, it's a bit of a soggy bottom. In The Master, PTA uses a thinly veiled fictionalized adaptation of the founding of the Church of Scientology, not as any sort of takedown of the problematic cults or exploration of the use of religion to prey on the vulnerable, although it is that, but instead PTA uses this subject matter to really focus in on the relationship of two people, the cult's leader Lancaster Dodd, and his newest disciple Freddie Quell. Dodd is a figure who needs adulation. He is obsessed with being the smartest person in the room, he feeds off of people's love, he must always be in complete control. And in the problematic and wild and unruly Freddy, he finally has found a foil that can inspire him and provide a greater purpose. And Freddy is a reckless loose cannon who destroys everything he touches, striving for any sense of stability, leaving him susceptible to the machinations of a charismatic and scheming figure like Dodd. We all serve a master. Even when we think we're serving ourselves, we're really just worshiping an idol of control. Dodd and Freddy's push and pull dynamic is utterly riveting, and I genuinely don't think there's a single movie that has two combined lead performances as strong as Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix here. This is two of the greatest actors of their generation delivering the best performances of their careers. Seeing them go toe-to-toe in sequences like the auditing scene or the jail cell scene make for some of the very best moments in PTA's entire career. And that's a pretty high bar. Aside from that, this has some of the best cinematography of any movie in Anderson's filmography. Just absolutely gorgeous visuals. The score from Johnny Greenwood can be simultaneously romantic and haunting and plucky and weird. And yet, despite all of that, I just can't help but come away feeling like the totality of The Master isn't quite as good as the sum of its parts. It's a film that feels top-heavy to me and kind of putters off into the void prematurely, like Freddy on the motorbike. It's an ending that I'm still wrestling with, wishing it packed a bigger emotional and thematic wallop, but maybe a slower fade is more true to life. Number 5 is Phantom Thread, and this is the part of my rankings where I no longer have any complaints, just effusive praises. Phantom Thread follows a renowned and controlling fashion designer named Reynolds Woodcock, who begins an unexpected romance with a waitress named Alma. Through this central relationship, Anderson explores what it means to love and all of the complicated messiness that entails. Reynolds is a man who is still haunted by the death of his mother, and now keeps his emotional walls up by shunning any form of intimacy and dedicating his life solely to his craft. But after meeting Alma, Reynolds is forced to confront what it means to be in love and the effort that's required to be in a committed romantic partnership. As he falls back into his egotistical ways, it's only when he's made low by illness that he can become vulnerable. And so Alma begins poisoning her lover to assert her own power and dominance in the relationship, finding a sort of toxic but ultimately mutually beneficial and loving equality. And Reynolds accepts this arrangement, choosing to continually rely on his partner to care for him, allowing himself to be vulnerable in her presence. That choice to put your complete trust in another person and give yourself over to them fully is really beautiful. It's a surprisingly sentimental exploration of a grand romance and how it's okay to truly need another person. Of course, bolstering that central romance is the fact that Reynolds and Alma are portrayed brilliantly by Daniel Day-Lewis and Vicky Krieps. Purported to be Daniel Day-Lewis's final role, the actor delivers such an excellent lived-in quality to Reynolds, so effortlessly making him command every room he enters, but also revealed the subtle slipping of the facade that covers the lonely and romantic boy hiding underneath all of the confident bluster. He's cruel, he's charming, he's romantic, all in perfect measure. And then there's Vicky Krieps, who more than holds her own as the woman of lower stature, who gains the confidence to go toe-to-toe against a living legend, on screen and off. She's meek and powerful and scheming and adoring, just two pitch-perfect performances coming together to form an intoxicating romance. As per usual, the rest of the craftsmanship around the acting is also sublime. There's strangely no credited director of photography on this movie, but the cinematography is dependably stellar. It feels both fantastically exquisite yet also raw and authentic, with the blemishes adding to the beauty, like the calloused hands of Reynolds Woodcock crafting a new designer gown. I think the score is quite possibly my all-time favorite from Johnny Greenwood, and of course the costumes are just insane. This is a movie about a guy who makes the most beautiful clothing in the world, and so the pieces depicted in the film need to reflect that, and they do. This is a staggering achievement, and I think time will only further solidify its position as not only one of PTA's best, but one of the greatest works of the decade. In between his sprawling 90s epic Magnolia and his universally hailed modern classic There Will Be Blood, PTA took a bit of an unexpected detour with Punch Drunk Love, a smaller story in both scope and scale, clocking in at a little over 90 minutes. It's a simple story about love and all the messiness that comes with it, much like Phantom Thread, but its simplicity makes it no less impactful. PTA perfectly utilizes Adam Sandler's goofy sincerity and propensity for random outbursts of rage in the lead role here. He's a guy who's lonely, struggling to find any form of human connection, but always feeling like an outcast even amongst his very large family. He tries to change himself to fit in, wearing a new suit, accruing frequent flyer miles for flights he never intends to take, lying about his faults, or embarrassing rough edges out of fear of rejection. Sandler delivers such an incredible performance here, and the line, "I don't know if there's anything wrong because I don't know how other people feel," just absolutely destroys me. The score is near constant and overbearing, putting the audience in Sandler's headspace of feeling like life is always anxiety-inducing and overwhelming. In a way, it feels like a bit of a precursor to Uncut Gems with its tightrope walk of stress levels, yet with a little bit of Eternal Sunshine's quirky romantic sincerity, and even some of the off-kilter vocal cadences of a Yorgos Lanthimos film mixed in. There's not really anything else like it in Anderson's filmography, and that just makes it all the more fascinating. Emily Watson is great as the female lead, and the central romance between her and Sandler is so sweet and raw and moving. She brings a calm to Barry's car crash of a life, leaving him with something beautiful from the wreckage. She helps him stop lying to himself and others and channel his eccentricities and flaws into becoming the best version of himself and finding his real strength there. That line when Sandler confronts Philip Seymour Hoffman, "I have a love in my life that makes me stronger than anything you can imagine." Come on, man. This movie is beautiful. I love it. Number 3 is Boogie Nights. With just his second feature, Paul Thomas Anderson was given the freedom to create a sprawling period epic on a scale we just don't see enough filmmakers given the opportunity to achieve anymore. The film opens in 1977 and follows a high school dropout named Eddie Adams. Everyone around him, most cruelly his own mother, tells him he'll amount to nothing. He's young and naive and easy prey for porn producer Jack Horner, who introduces him to a world of excess and sex and drugs and companionship. With Boogie Nights, Anderson walks a tightrope wire of themes. He explores the exploitative nature of the porn industry, preying on young, impressionable outcasts, promising them the world, giving them a taste of their dream, and then disposing of them when a newer, younger, hotter object of lust and desire arrives on the scene. But it's also a movie about a found family, as the support system Eddie finds as porn star Dirk Diggler amongst his fellow actors and crew members is one of a more unconditional love. They're all outcasts who society simultaneously lusts after in secret but admonish in public. It's also a movie about the changing of the eras, of the people that get lost or left behind as they fail to adapt to the new ways of the world and their industry, or how even in sustaining your career you can lose your identity in the process. It's all somehow tragic and oddly sincere. The soundtrack is absolutely killer, and the performances are dependably masterful across the board. Anderson is clearly reverent for this time period in his excellent and gorgeous recreation of its style and aesthetic, and also reverential for a time where people actually went to the theaters to enjoy some real cinema shot on film, instead of cheapening the art by releasing it on video to view at home. Same as it ever was, huh? And that brings us to number 2. By the time of There Will Be Blood's release in 2007, Paul Thomas Anderson had already firmly solidified himself as one of our greatest living directors. And yet somehow, with his 5th film, barely 10 years into his career, he managed to mine new depths of cinematic riches and deliver a magnum opus instant classic. It's the story of an oil tycoon overcome with a lust for power. There's always more to be had. More oil, more money, more power, and if you have it, he'll take it. It's a capitalist screed on the depths of greed. It's the story of a man who barely understands what it means to be human, putting on a performance to fool everyone, even at times himself. He leaves devastation in his wake with no regard for those caught in the crossfire. Fire shoots out of the ground like he's plundering his wealth from literal hell. On the page, Daniel Plainview is one of the most fascinatingly complex figures ever conceived, and in his performance, Daniel Day-Lewis delivers quite possibly one of the greatest acting achievements of all time. It's a film where from frame one, the craftsmanship is just so evidently perfect, working on a level so rarely achieved. The beautiful extended opening with no dialogue is jaw-dropping, and just sets the tone for the masterwork that follows. It's a crowning achievement in Anderson's career, and an easy number 1 on pretty much any other filmmaker's filmography, except for the fact that he already made a sprawling epic character study in the 90s whose more eccentric qualities just speak to me on a more personal level. Magnolia is not just my favorite Paul Paul Thomas Anderson film, it's also one of my favorite films of all time, period. His follow-up to Boogie Nights is another sprawling epic featuring a stacked ensemble, this time set in the present and telling an interconnected story of characters bound by fate or chance, all looking for meaning in their lives. It's a deeply sincere and audacious story of forgiveness that, despite many dark moments and themes, also offers the hope in finding happiness, as ultimately, eventually, the rain will stop. Everyone is going through something. Everyone has their own story, and you never know just how much it might relate to your own. This is one of those movies that just feels so confident and masterful that even when it takes some absolutely wild swings, it all feels natural and inevitable. Of course, the characters all randomly break out into song 3 hours into the film in a moment of shared grief and catharsis. How else could this movie possibly end? Once again, Anderson has assembled a who's who of the greatest living actors for this wide-ranging and eclectic ensemble, giving them all some of the best material of each of their illustrious careers. And in a filmography filled with excellent cast, Magnolia clears them all. Anderson gives his usual suspects such great material here, and it really feels special seeing his first two leads, Philip Baker Hall and John C. Reilly, given the chance to rise to the occasion, giving two absolutely stunning acting showcases. But the standout is of course a newcomer to Anderson's ensemble, Tom Cruise, who is so charismatic, so despicable, and so heartbreaking as Frank T.J. Mackey, a character that feels just as relevant today amongst a litany of toxically masculine social media influencers. There's nothing I don't love about this movie. It's big, it's bold, it's weird, it's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, it's life-affirming, the directing is masterful, every song you hear suddenly becomes an all-time favorite, the editing is inspired, and it unashamedly wears its heart on its sleeve. I love Magnolia, there was never any doubt that it's my favorite film by Paul Thomas Anderson. So that's my list. Let me know your rankings in the comments below and just tell me how wrong I am. Follow me on Letterboxd at Josh G. Floyd for more of my up-to-date movie thoughts, and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.